and this is Baby Ready. And today we are tackling a conversation or a topic that is very close to my heart, and that is the baby blues and postpartum depression. And the reason that this topic is so close to my heart, is so sensitive for me, is such a hot button topic for me, is because I had postpartum depression. After the birth of my second child, about 6 months after he was born, I was officially diagnosed with postpartum depression. And I didn't see it coming. I didn't have an issue after my first child was born. I sailed through that, or at least I felt like I sailed through that. But after the birth of my second child, a variety of different things came into play. And I don't know if any one of those triggered the response in me, or whether it was a culmination of everything, or whether I just happened to draw the short straw with that postpartum period. But whatever it was, I ended up with postpartum depression. My youngest son was born in May of 2001, and I had no issues with him in terms of getting him to feed from my body. That went very smoothly. Transitioning to parenting too, actually, was easier than I expected it would be based on the conversations I'd had with other people. But that year wasn't without its challenges. Someone I was very close to gave birth to a child who wasn't expected to live. In fact, a few of us gathered at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto around her bedside while she was still on life support, so that she could be baptized before being removed from life support. And she lived. She lived for 6 months. She was an overwhelmingly special needs child. And she filled our hearts with all kinds of love and taught us things about ourselves that we didn't know we needed to learn. But to say that it wasn't a stressful time would be a lie. It was very stressful for those of us who loved the parents and the family and who loved that little girl, as well as those of us with our own children who were raising them. My child and this child were only 2 months apart in age. Our vision as parents was that these two children would grow up the best of friends, the same way that our older children were friends, and super, super close and totally in love with one another. So it was heartbreaking to know that this child was so ill. My youngest child was diagnosed with infantile colitis. And ultimately what that meant for me was that if I consumed any animal milk protein whatsoever, his system, through the milk from my body, would become so irritated and inflamed that he would bleed from his bowels and cry endlessly in pain. He was truly otherwise a very happy, happy child. And so this was such a swift change, and it started around the time he was about 6 weeks old. And it continued. And so I modified all of my diet. And so here I had a child who needed me to be careful and needed me to watch everything I was consuming. I had a 3-year-old who was adapting beautifully, but adapting to life now as a larger family. A friend with a child who was very, very ill, that we were all trying to pitch in and help with as much as we possibly could, because that friend also had an older child who needed some attention and time and care. And then September 11th happened. And I distinctly remember being at home with my kids when my phone rang and a friend called to ask me if my television was on. Well, it wasn't, because it rarely was, but I turned it on and I watched in horror as the world changed forever. And with 2 children sitting in my lap as I watched this horror, I wondered what on earth I was bringing humans into the world for. 2 months later, to the day, my friend's child died. And we mourned that loss. But it was about a week after that I was driving towards my parents' house a couple of hours away, and I pulled over on the side of the road and I wept. My 2 children were in the back seat. I was safely off the road, and I wept and I cried and I wept and I kept chanting over and over, I'm not coping, I'm not coping. And I think that eventually something just broke. And I got lucky because I knew what signs I was looking for. I knew what concerns I should have, and I sought help, got help, and found the road to recovery. But it wasn't easy, and it took time. And I think that's one of the things that people are surprised by when they learn or think about postpartum depression, is that it isn't something you just get over. It is something that you truly need some help and support with, whether it's medical support, whether it's naturopathic support, whether it's conversational support with groups of peers who know where you are. It is important to not push it down. But beyond that, and more importantly sometimes than that, is the role our partners play when postpartum is an issue. Our partners often recognize the signs and symptoms of postpartum depression in us before we recognize those signs and symptoms in ourselves. And to that end, partners, I encourage you to pay attention, to be aware. What is this parent of your child like all the time? Have they changed dramatically? Have they pulled away? Are they more reclusive? Are they apathetic about everything? Are they raging uncontrollably? Because here's the thing, with postpartum depression, we often think sadness. We think depressive acts, seclusion, avoiding caring for ourselves, and in this case, caring for ourselves and or our baby, or sometimes we just meet the needs of our baby, but we never meet them for ourselves, but we don't care that we don't meet them for ourselves. But rage is common, and it is still part of postpartum depression. It's almost as though the buildup happens of all of the emotions of everything, and we can't control them. So we rage. And I know people who have thought about just throwing things, just opening the cupboards and pitching all of the dishes all over the place to get it out, to exert that energy. And so for some people who are experiencing postpartum depression, one of the things that's great for them is to be able to get out and do active physical exercise on their own, time to themselves. But that's me regressing. I'm talking to partners about things that you can watch, but do watch for the rage, because sometimes that's a completely different side of your partner than you've ever seen before. And that's okay. They need to express that, but talk to them. I see it presenting in so many different ways, and I will post something here in the comments section with a link to the page on my website where all of the resources come from that I share on this YouTube channel. There is a link to different PDFs that I post there, the things that I've written that you are more than welcome to have access to, because sometimes a checklist is really helpful. So how do we know if what we're experiencing is postpartum depression or if it's just the baby blues? Life after the baby is born is somewhat difficult to adjust to. You've been through the pregnancy and your estrogen levels are through the roof, as they need to be in order for you to grow a healthy baby and get yourself through the pregnancy properly. But once the baby's on the outside, those hormones have to change. And our bodies do that to us, or for us. I need to say they do it for us on purpose, because in order to be able to produce an adequate amount of food for our babies, milk for our babies from our bodies, then we need to suppress estrogen levels. And so we take an estrogen dominant individual who's producing mass amounts of estrogen, and in the first 2 weeks after our babies are born, tell that same body that it needs to start suppressing estrogen. So it takes a couple of weeks for that up and down and up and down and up and down of hormones to settle in. And those peaks and valleys are big. You know, we'll have peaks of elation and happiness, and I can't believe I love this baby so much, and I'm just filled with love and enamored of the individual that I birthed, and then there are valleys of despair and feeling like the world is bleak and dark and difficult, and it feels so unsettled. It truly feels unsettled. You'll get in the shower and you'll be standing shampooing your hair, and all of a sudden you're weeping for no particular reason. And by the time you get out of the shower, you feel so much better because it's just out. That emotion has just been shed. And the valleys happen often, as much as anything, at night. We already tend to feel vulnerable and raw after the sun goes down. There's a darkness to the world that sometimes creates a bit of a darkness in us. And so that's not uncommon for you to feel more challenged by parenting in the evenings and through the night. And it's easier, and the peaks are higher during the day. But those peaks and valleys over the course of the first 10 days or so are very normal, and it can be up to 2 weeks. Whereas we don't typically see postpartum depression starting until your baby is at least 2 weeks old, when the hormones have regulated themselves a bit. And it can start anywhere in the after the first 2 weeks, in the first 2 years of your baby's life. And all kinds of different things can trigger it. And there isn't any one set of rules that we should be following to know whether or not what we're feeling is postpartum depression. And we see it in the news a lot, although it's not labeled as such. But it happens, and it's pervasive. And some studies have shown that as many as 1 in 4 birthing parents suffer from postpartum depression after they give birth. But the vast majority of parents who've birthed in general have some baby blues at the very least. So please seek help. It's not something you correct for yourself. As I say, see your family doctor, see your naturopath, go for acupuncture, seek a circle of friends, or find a community online where resources are available to you for postpartum support groups. I've said this before, and I will say it again. It is truly important for you to find a circle of parents that have babies around the same age as yours, who know you as nothing else other than your child's parent. They have no preconceived ideas about who you are or what you believe in or how you behave, other than what they witness as that child's parent. And those resources are infinite. In fact, I was talking to somebody just the other day about this very thing. I'm still connected with many of the parents that I became friends with when my eldest child was born. And many of us went on to have subsequent children around the same time. And so our younger children are about the same age. And it's fascinating to watch their children grow up and see how their children have matured and developed and changed, and the life that they've taken on. But I still truly only know those people as the parents of those children, well, adults now. And I have no judgment. And if they needed me to, I would always be there to listen, as I know they'd always be there to listen to me. So seek out establishing some of those. And sometimes setting things like that up before your child arrives goes a long way to making it easier for you to seek out those connections once your baby's on the outside. So check out your Ontario Early Years Centre and find out about drop-ins, or your public health department and ask them if they do a Calling New Parents class or something like that. Reach out to the local library and find out when their story times are. I recognize that we're in a pandemic and that things are different right now, but gradually and slowly, different organizations are opening up and functioning in a different way, whether their classes are virtual, whether their library gatherings are outside. It's all changing, and it's all constantly evolving. I want to take a moment to list some of the traditional signs and symptoms of postpartum depression so that these don't get missed by you or anyone important to you. They include indifference to the baby, yourself, and/or others. There's a progressive change in you which shows that things are just not right. You feel as though you are not coping well with the adjustments being made. You feel like you could or will hurt yourself or your baby. Excessive, uncontrollable crying spells. Obsessiveness, for example, unable to leave the baby with competent care person, and you're feeling as though you are the only one who can meet the needs of your baby effectively. Feeling overwhelmed by daily routines. Overeating, undereating, chronic fatigue or hypersomnia, inability to sleep or insomnia, feelings of powerlessness, inadequacy, hopelessness, feelings of isolation, despondency and alienation, restlessness, jumping from one activity to another, anxiety or panic attacks, agoraphobia or fear of going outside of your home, memory loss and confusion, and as stated before, an overwhelming and seemingly uncontrollable anger. It can be important to remember that postpartum depression often presents similarly to sleep deprivation. So if you're not certain what it is that has caused these feelings in you, or if you're the partner and you're not certain what has caused these feelings in the birthing parent, then one of the things that you may decide you would like to try is setting up a schedule for 3 or 4 days, and it will take some time for consistency, where you allow the birthing parent to get good, consistent, longer blocks of sleep and see if that helps. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes the birthing parent, if they are well and truly entrenched in postpartum depression, may not be okay with the idea of this activity or this approach. So it's a conversation that you want to have. It's really important as the non-birthing parent to remind your partner how much you love them, how you want to be there and support them, how you recognize how much has changed from their physical body, but also their emotional body in taking care of your baby every day, and all of the demands that includes, as well as the demands of post-birth and thinking about you and your time with the baby, and all of these things kind of culminate together. And for some people, they're triggers. So I encourage you to have those conversations. Just keep reminding your partner that you love them. If you have any questions or concerns, or if things have come up for you that have raised questions in your mind or worries about yourself or your partner, and you don't know where to start, then please, by all means, feel free to leave a comment here in the comment section and I'll get back to you. And if that feels too vulnerable, please don't hesitate to send me an email. My email address is babyreadylgbtq@gmail.com. There's also a comment section on my submission page on my website, www.babyready.info, and I will get back to you. I encourage you to support one another, reach out to one another, always be there for one another. For those of you who have babies, who are having babies, who know people who are having babies, and be a community for one another. Please subscribe to my channel. Ask everyone you know to subscribe to my channel. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.